Hey there, Washington public employees. Are you approaching retirement and wondering, should I pay my mortgage off or not? Well, that's a question I get asked all the time. As a financial advisor and CPA helping Washington public employees plan their financial futures, I love getting into the weeds of should you pay it off or should you not? There are quantitative aspects of making that decision to pay off your mortgage. Does the math make sense? And then there are qualitative. Can I sleep at night having a mortgage? Or in order to have more peace of mind in retirement, do I need to pay that off? My name is Seth Thiel. I'm a CPA and financial advisor with Life Focus Financial Advisors, and I love helping public employees transition to retirement and helping them think about questions like, should I pay off my mortgage or not? When we're thinking about whether to pay off our mortgage, the first component of that is that we want to think about the math behind that decision. And what do I mean by math? I mean, what is your interest rate on your mortgage and what could you get from an investment return standpoint? So let's start with your mortgage interest rate. If you have a 3-4% mortgage interest rate, so you bought in 2020 or so, or you refinanced during those low interest times, that's going to lead to a more favorable mathematical equation when thinking about whether to pay your mortgage off or not. However, let's say if you just bought a house recently at 6-7%, that math equation becomes a little more complex and the scale starts to lean towards potentially paying that mortgage off. So let's talk a little bit more in depth with that. For this example, for this scenario, we're going to use long-term historical stock market average returns. So let's say the stock market has gotten on average about 10% over the last 100 years or so. We're going to use that as our baseline. However, depending on how you're invested, what your investment philosophy is, how much risk you're willing to take, that number could be lower. So it could be 8, 9, 10%. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. If you're at 3 or 4%, and we're going to assume our investment can get 10% over a long period of time, say the length of a mortgage, 15, 30 years, that 6 or 7% difference is quite favorable. And from an interest rate standpoint, you're really not going to get a more favorable interest rate than 3 or 4%. So generally, I lean towards recommending putting any extra money into investments versus paying off your mortgage more quickly at those lower interest rates. At 6 or 7%, though, that math changes a lot where it's only a couple percent difference, maybe, and that's not guaranteed. So we want to keep that in mind that as we get higher, I generally lean towards paying off the mortgage more quickly. However, with that in mind, there's not an ATM in your mortgage where you can just go get money out of it. There are ways to get money out of it through HELOCs or reverse mortgages. However, even if we have a higher interest rate, we want to keep in mind the flexibility that we have of putting any extra money into investments versus paying off the mortgage. A lot of times with my clients with those higher interest rates, we like to take a split approach where we're still paying off that mortgage quickly and getting essentially a guaranteed return and then putting some into an investment account as well. So it's a little bit of a balancing act at those higher interest rates. But in summary, those lower interest rates, we definitely want to lean towards keeping that mortgage, putting that extra money into our savings. At those higher interest rates, we want to balance paying the mortgage off more quickly and also saving some. But it's really going to be dependent upon your situation, your preferences, and more of those qualitative aspects that we're going to talk about now. All right, let's get into some of those qualitative aspects of paying off your mortgage or not. If you're a Washington public employee, one thing to keep in mind is that we have a pension, and that pension is a stable fixed source of guaranteed income that's adjusted with inflation each year that you can rely on to help potentially pay some of your mortgage. You might also have Social Security. So keep in mind that if our fixed income is sufficient to pay our mortgage plus all of our other regular living expenses, that tends to lean or to push me towards not paying your mortgage off as quickly, even at those higher interest rates. So to recap, if your fixed income is generally covering all of your living expenses, including your mortgage, and you're just using your investments for those fun activities in retirement, I tend to lean towards keeping that mortgage. The other qualitative aspect that we want to think about when deciding whether to pay our mortgage off or not is, can we sleep at night with that mortgage on the books? Is it going to keep us up at night? Are we going to have to pop Tums to be able to sleep and get through retirement? And if that's the case for you, then you definitely should consider paying the mortgage off more quickly if you're able to. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what the math says, if you're not able to fully enjoy your retirement, then the rest of this, it doesn't matter, to be quite frank. So it's really important for you to enjoy your retirement, because at the end of the day, you only get one. And most important thing I emphasize with my clients is that you only get one retirement, and you want to make the most of your one retirement. All right, let's give you a key decision framework to think through this process so that way you can help apply it to your specific situation. Ultimately, your decision is going to be based on your unique factors and circumstances. You first want to start off, what's your mortgage interest rate versus your expected rate of returns? So that if you're at that 3 or 4%, you're potentially getting 10-ish% from investment return. That makes a lot of sense, but that gap does narrow as those interest rates go up. The next key decision point that we want to think about is, what is your mortgage payment as a percentage of your fixed income? If your mortgage payment is a relatively low percentage of your fixed income in retirement, then it often makes sense to keep that mortgage on the books. The next key factor we want to think about, what's your risk tolerance, and what I like to call the sleep at night factor. If you're going to have trouble sleeping at night with a mortgage on your books, that's something you potentially want to pay off more quickly. You then want to think about time horizon and any potential downsizing plans that you have. If you're planning on downsizing in the next couple of years, probably doesn't make sense to pay that mortgage off more quickly. However, if you're planning it to stay in your house throughout your entire retirement, that changes that factor, and you potentially do want to pay that off more quickly. What I see most often happening with my clients is we take a hybrid approach between paying it off more quickly and keeping that full mortgage. That hybrid approach tends to give folks a lot of peace of mind, but it also maintains that liquidity and flexibility that you have by not having all of your money tied up in your house. All right, I'm all about action steps and what you can do today to help you get a grasp on whether you want to pay off your mortgage more quickly or not. Start with calculating your mortgage payment as a percentage of your fixed income in retirement. Then you want to compare your mortgage interest rate to expected investment returns and look at that gap between your mortgage interest rate and those investment returns. If that gap's 5, 6, 7%, then it potentially makes sense to not pay that mortgage off. As that gap gets narrower, that's where we want to take that hybrid approach. Lastly, take some time, talk with your spouse or your partner, and assess your risk tolerance. Is it going to keep you both up at night if you have this mortgage? Or can you sleep with that a part of your financial future? Thanks for tuning in to this video. I hope you got a lot out of this discussion. If you're ever wanting to potentially learn more about working together, go to lifefocusadvisors.com. I also have a free guide in the description below showing some of the different mistakes that I commonly see being made. So check out that free download below.